Hello. This is a video about my approach to capturing and processing close-up images of flowers, buds, berries, that sort of thing. It's about my current approach, and that can change. I mean, for me, photography is a matter of experiment and trial and error, and I change how I do things and change the kit I use from time to time. So this is not some permanent, this is how I do it, this is how I do it at the moment. It's also specific to the flowers and so on. For example, for insects and other invertebrates, I use different kit and different capture techniques and different processing. The video is going to be in two parts. I went out earlier today into the garden and captured some images of flowers, and then we'll watch what happened when I processed the images on my PC. In the garden, I was using a Panasonic G9 Micro Four Thirds camera with an Olympus 60mm macro lens, and I was using two techniques. One of them is aperture bracketing, and that with one shutter, a press of the shutter button, takes, with this lens, 7 images from f2.8 to f22. The reason I do this is that, unlike some people, I can't look at a scene and say, oh yes, f8 would look good for this. This way I can leave the decision till later on as to which of the apertures looks good, and that suits my way of working. And the second technique is focus stacking, where I join together a number of images to make an image with greater depth of field. And I use video for that. A lot of people use focus bracketing, where you take a lot of single images in sequence. I prefer using video because the capture rate is about 6 times faster on this camera than with focus bracketing, which runs at about 4.5 frames a second. The video runs at 30 frames a second. I'm also using 6K video, which on this camera produces images of 18 megapixels compared to 8 megapixels if I'm using 4K. I tackled 3 subjects out in the garden, and the first one was out in the front garden, which is quite close to a road, and the traffic noise is noisy. There's some traffic noise in the other two, but not as much. Hopefully you'll be able to hear what I'm saying okay in the first one. The video for the first one is pretty shaky. That's because I was using this camera in one hand and had a little travel camera in the other hand, taking pictures of this camera so I could try and show you what was happening on the screen while I was doing this. And I did have to put this one down a couple of times to pick something else up. And in any case, both cameras are moving independently, so it's a bit interesting. The other thing is that at one point or 2 points in the second and third examples, you'll see me doing something very peculiar like this. What's happening there is that there are 2 buttons on the front of this camera, and very useful they are too, but I can't quite reach the one that I wanted at that point with my fingers in their normal position, and it's easier if I just let the camera drop and my finger can more easily reach the button I'm trying to get to, and then use it like that. So, that was in the garden. Let's first of all look at how that went, and then afterwards we can look at the post-processing. Here we are out in the garden, front garden complete with passing traffic, so I hope you're going to be able to hear me okay. And if we have a look around, we had the first frost of the year last night, and it's a clear day, clear sky, quite cold, and although there are some green things, there's not a lot around by way of flowers. For example, there are still a few odd flowers left on this Mahonia. But not much else. What I have found though is there's a Nigella plant here, and what I'm going to do is to have a go at this flower, and I'm going to do three things. I'm going to be using the G9, which is around here somewhere. There it is. And the first thing I'm going to do is to set up the white balance. In order to do that, I'm going to use an X-Rite Colour Checker Passport. This has colour swatches on it which are used for constructing camera profiles, but I'm going to use the white area on it. Now, this first part of the video may be a bit wobbly because I'm going to be holding one little camera in one hand to take the video, while holding the G9 in my other hand to use it one-handed. So we'll see how that goes. So what I'm going to do is and I'll do this in this case with the colour checker on the ground rather than holding it in my hand as I usually do. So if we can have a look here at the back of the camera, I point the camera, getting a lot of reflections here. Right, point the camera at the colour checker. There's a button on the front of the camera that I've set up so that it then lets me set the white balance. It gives me a target area which I put over the grey card, press the shutter button, and the white balance has now been set. So that's step one. The next thing, I've got the camera set up so it's going to take an aperture bracket sequence. I'll just watch what happens here and then I'll explain what's going on. So there's the subject, and we can see at the bottom left it's set up at f2.8 at the moment. That was a half press of the shutter button, which is focusing in the central area, and if I fully press the shutter button, it then ran through from f2.8 to f22. And the way this works is that I've set it up so that it will use base ISO as long as it can. It's as the aperture gets smaller, that's going to be more difficult, and it may get to the point where it can't use base ISO anymore, or rather the shutter speed will get to an 80th of a second, and that's as slow as I want it to go. At that point it will start raising the ISO, and if it gets to the point where the ISO gets to 3200 and I still want to carry on at that point, or if it still hasn't reached f22 yet, it will start slowing the shutter speed down from an 80th of a second. So what I'll do here, if we that was the second one, although I don't know that I was pointing at the subject, so I'll give it another go. So it's going to be at 160th at ISO 200 to begin with, and then at the end it's at f22, it's at a 40th of a second at ISO 3200. Which is quite slow. I probably won't use f22 anyway, but we'll talk about that later. So I'll give it another go. I typically do 3. Let's give it another one. So it's quite quick and easy to do. So the next thing I'm going to do is to, if it will focus on it, yeah, I'm going to alter this so that it's set up to do what's called a post-focus video. I'm going to have to put the videoing camera down for a moment and pick it up again without turning it off. Right, and now that is, I've altered that lever so that it's now pointing to it's got a little flower sign on it, a mountain and a flower, which shows that it goes from far to near, or actually near to far. So what happens is that if I half press the shutter button, you'll see that it's wobble around, and what it's doing is working out what the nearest thing and the furthest thing it can find to focus on. So I'll do that again, and then if I fully press the shutter button, you'll see some green squares moving around, and that's showing what it's focusing on. And so if I do that again, so that's the half press of the shutter button, and there goes the green squares. And I'll give it one more go. In this case it's doing the whole thing at f2.8, so it's at 1/60th, as it was when it started out with the aperture bracketing, but of course it stays with those settings. So I'll try it once more. And by the way, the cross in the centre isn't saying where I'm focusing. The camera is deciding where to focus. This is very much a point and shoot thing. I don't have to do any calculations about how many images I'm going to capture, what the spacing is between them. It handles all that for me. And I might decide, for example, well actually I'd like a closer look at this one, so I could move in on it and have another go, try that framing. I want to try it so that what I'm interested in doesn't sort of go past the edge of the frame. And again, I typically do 3 of these. So there we are. I've set the white balance, taken several aperture bracket shots and several post-focus videos with the focus racking from the front to the back of the scene. What I'll do now is change to a different setup. I'll put the camera on a tripod so you can see what it looks like, as it were, from the outside rather than looking at the camera. So back in a minute or two. The next thing I'm going to try is this plant in a pot. So, first thing to do is to set the white balance. Here we go. And that's done. Now, some aperture bracket sets. Let's see. Oh, this isn't going to compose wonderfully, but let me see. That'll do. So, 1, 2, 3. Change it to do post focus. 1. Oops, put the lever in the wrong position, did I? No, what happened there? Right, try again. I've lost my subject now. Oh, there it is. So, 1 post focus. Second one. and the third one. Now that's how long it takes to do each subject, so it's really quite fast. The next thing I'm going to try is one of the few flowers that's out at the moment on this bush. I'm going to go for these two here, but I'll be tackling them from a different angle. So the first thing, as before, turn the camera on and set the white balance. Press two buttons, point camera at grey swatch, take a picture, white balance, done. Set camera to take aperture bracket set, point camera at subject, compose, bit of focus and recompose. Yeah, that'll do. Let's take it around a little bit. Yes, 1, 2, I'm focusing and recomposing each time. 3, because I'm lazy and can't be bothered to move the focus point, although that's quite easy with this camera because it does have a joystick. Alter so that I can now do post-focus video and half press and full press, and it takes the video finished, half press, full press, it takes the video, and third time, just wait a minute for it to save that. Okay, and a half press, full press, and it takes the third one. So I've now set the white balance, taken 3 aperture bracket sets and 3 post focus videos. Okay.